We all nestle under the great tree of wisdom, peering out to perceive the world. From the earth and from the rain, we perceive its wonders, until we become a white bird to perch atop a branch, and finally snap off the most important leaf. Once upon a time, I alone dreamed in this world. In my dreams, everybody would also dream after they fell asleep. Wild and wonderful thoughts would emerge from their minds. Some tumbled to the ground, and others floated to the sky, connecting all things in the world into one dazzling net. Among a plethora of worlds were numerous smaller worlds, all of fate, finding within the tapestry their brilliant glow. I gradually understood that these indescribable and constantly changing things are the most profound things in the world.
In this touching scene, Greater Lord Rukkhadevata is explaining how Lesser Lord Kusanali, Nahida, came to be. In the fight against forbidden knowledge, which was slowly killing the Irminsul tree like a disease, she sought to erase every drop of its existence from the memories of the people. However, Rukkhadevata would still remember forbidden knowledge, and this meant that it could not be erased entirely. So, she devises to take the most important leaf, the purest branch of Irminsul, and creates Nahida, who would one day come and erase Rukkhadevata from the memories of everyone, getting rid of forbidden knowledge once and for all. This is an interesting concept, as we can deduce that Nahida is not Rukkhadevata, but rather an offshoot that Rukkhadevata had created, much like that of a mother and child that, as the Dendro Archon, is tied to the Irminsul tree. Rukkhadevata is aware of everything from her own past up to the present, but Nahida is her own person, despite her ties to Rukkhadevata. In terms of Rukkhadevata, we know from the Sumeru Archon quest, Chapter 3, Act 4, King Deshret and the Three Magi, that once Rukkhadevata used all of her power, she'd taken the form of a small child. This is supported from when we meet Rukkhadevata's memory. She is in the form of that small child that looks exactly like Nahida.
Were it not for Greater Lord Rukkhadevata from the forests, the damage would have been irreversible. She summoned the priests to build temples and infused into them the divine power of life. The disaster was miraculously tempered, and the embers of our civilization were preserved in Aru village. Alas, the miracle could not last. As long as forbidden knowledge continued to exist, it would forever blight this world. I have spent my whole life since guarding one of these many temples. But now, my duty is coming to an end. As I close my eyes for the final time, the sight of that noble deity will appear in my vision once more. In helping the Scarlet King to eradicate forbidden knowledge, she exhausted her strength, and her form became that of a small child. How strange. Now that I think of her, I no longer have any fear of death, for I sense that the spirit of life will abide with me during my eternal sleep.
The most interesting thing in this scene, aside from the lore we were given, is Paimon's reaction to it. Genshin's fatal flaw is that Paimon is often used as a device to repeat back what other characters have just told us, and oftentimes making it blatantly obvious that Paimon herself has little to no knowledge of the topic in these conversations. Oftentimes just as confused and as lost as the traveler. Yet, in this cutscene, the aftermath following, she says little and is uncharacteristically quiet. It's been heavily implied that Paimon is somehow tied to the unknown god we met at the beginning of the game. Why would Paimon suddenly be unwilling to comment on this information in this cutscene? Or rather, why did the writers choose not to have her comment on it? If we follow this assumption, we can presume that Paimon is in a similar cycle to Rukkhadevata and Nahida. She is either the unknown god in a weakened state, or the purest branch offshoot of the unknown god. Through her behavior alone, we can determine which one. Throughout the game, Paimon is incredibly sweet, if not a bit annoying. She's very in the dark about the majority of the events and the going-ons that pertain to the plot in the world at any given moment. If in this scenario she were actually the unknown god in a weaker state, much in the same way Rukkhadevata was after exhausting all of her power, that would leave far too many questions with no answers. It would also mean that Paimon was highly manipulative, or at the very least sadistic, after what the unknown god did to our sibling. However, if we consider that Paimon is the purest branch, an offshoot of the unknown god, then things begin to make much more sense. Her pure behavior and childlike demeanor, and how she has little knowledge of the full picture, just like Nahida.
Why did he just call me?
Traveler!
If we are to explore this theory under the idea that characters who resemble other existing characters while maintaining their individuality, it is worth mentioning the Traveler. From the beginning of the game, it's said that we traveled the stars with our siblings and traversed many worlds until our fateful encounter with the unknown god, where we were separated and woke up in Teyvat. However, as mentioned previously, we know that Irminsul, the tree that stores all memories and knowledge of the world through ley lines, can be tampered with. It would not be that much of a stretch to assume that something doesn't quite add up, or rather, our memories could have been tampered with. It is assumed that as an Outlander, we are unaffected by these changes and that there will be no records of us in Irminsul, presumably because we do not belong to this world and thus are not relevant or are somehow invisible to the ley lines. But in this case, why is it that there are records of our sibling in Conria? Perhaps it could be assumed that they originated from this world fighting the Abyss, and we did not, as we were simply traveling the Sea of Stars, which happens to look a lot like the Abyss. If perhaps our sibling made us as an offshoot, the parallel is there. The Abyss is thought not to be of this world, which is why its corruption is so heavy. This could explain the hole in this part of the theory, but until more information is released, there are a lot of questions that still need answers. Even still, there are many points to support this theory from my perspective. The first being, since it's possible that we weren't made in the same way as Nahida, that it's possible our memories were either tampered with or obscured in some way. It could be that there are entire gaps in our memory. Irminsul can't fill in these gaps, and as a result, we encounter the memories of our sibling. While it is possible that this was simply a vision, why did we see it so vividly through their eyes to the point that we could not even recognize that we were in their place in that memory? The simple fact that we saw it through their eyes makes the idea that this was merely a vision less substantial. If perhaps it was sent directly to us from our sibling, why would they force us to relive their horror but give us no answers? The second is that this parallel of recreating oneself while those recreations become their own person is evident throughout the game, even if it's through different methods. We see this in Albeda's story as golems were made through Durin's bones until a successful attempt was made. We see it in Inazuma that dolls were made in Ea and Makoto's likeness in the forms of Scaramouche and the Raiden Shogun. And though neither are exact copies, there are similarities that cannot be explained through technology alone. Only time will tell as the story progresses how much of this theory is correct and how much is false.